the Anthropocene as a concept is about human impact on the planet, and the fact that right now humanity is the driving factor behind climate change. But there are also a lot of issues with this term from a social perspective. And there's a wonderful article by Mohamed Hornborg that I quote in the catalog essay, which talk about this more in detail. But basically, the problem with this term is that it presents the entire human race as one big entity that is responsible for climate change. And this is problematic because it has been a tiny fraction of the human race, in fact, a tiny fraction of humanity living in the global north, which propelled the changes that led to the climate chaos. So it has never been the people who were colonized by people in the global north who were exploited for profit, whose labor was exploited, whose life was exploited. So this term is profoundly problematic from that aspect. And in a way, this exhibition tries to challenge the Anthropocene notion and to shed light to the many layers that are behind it, and to ask if it is possible to recognize the social and political systems driving the climate chaos in our personal life, in our everyday banalities. So that is the central idea, essentially. Yes, and I think it would be great to hear from the artists and to let them have their work. Gustavo, would you like to make a start?
Yeah, sure. So hi, first of all, my name is Gustavo Balbela. I'm a photographer, artist, and industrial designer from Porto Alegre in the south of Brazil. I'm super happy to be here, super thankful to everybody, especially to Eszter. It's been a pleasure to develop this, to be part of this, and also, of course, to everyone at Procurator, at Parallel, to every one of our hosts, and yeah, and to everyone watching. So I'm gonna share my screen so that you can see my part on the exhibition. 1 second. Which one is this? I think this is the right one. Oh, 1 second. Sorry, guys. I won't be able to share my screen, I guess. Or I'm gonna have to quit Zoom and open it up again. Do you wanna invite some other artists to start talking while I reset, or do you want to share the screen for me and I comment the work?
I can share if you'd like to.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry for this. Should have tested this before.
No, don't worry. So this is our website, and it's also a nice opportunity to show you how to navigate the website.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So a brief overture to Letters to Ultramarine, which is the project in which these two series that Eszter and I selected for the exhibition are inserted in. Letters to Ultramarine is actually the project that I developed under Parallel with the tutorship of Natasha Caruana, and yeah, and it is a project that it's really it starts from a reflection on the feeling of anxiety and uncanniness and discomfort that I felt emanating from the urban environment that I inhabited. It really begins from this feeling that there is something wrong in the landscape, not wrong like in a moral sense, but there is something there that doesn't seem to be aligned with me, I guess, in a way, or that didn't seem to make sense beyond like the everyday perspective that we're so used to. And yeah, from this initial feeling of this initial intention to investigate this feeling of anxiety, I began to pay much more attention to these landscapes and try to relate what I was seeing and what I was feeling to multiple sources of theory, like philosophy and history and like, yeah, basically whatever I was reading at the time. And yeah, so from this starting point of investigating anxieties, I think I ended up arriving at, very roughly speaking, three different how can I say that? I don't mean exactly conclusions, but three different perspectives on my everyday landscape. So you have a general feeling of dissonance, of an ability to map my imaginary to the city itself, which is maybe the central one in the project. And that really comes a lot from my personal perspective as a young upper middle class Latin American man. And from this social context, I have always consumed a lot of images and narratives and language from the global north, specifically from US. So I think the city that I had always imagined is an American city, not a North American city. And at the same time, the city that the elite that I am somewhat part of in Brazil has always tried to build around me is also the same North American city. While in fact, the city that I was living in, the city that they are building, is not a North American city, but is a city that eventually looks like one. So when paying attention, and maybe even when not paying attention, tensions and dissonances between this idealized model and the reality around you begin to rise. And that was probably why I even started all of this. Additionally, and once I got started, and at this point I had already started to research and to actually click new images frequently, new matters that, of course, had at that point already been a concern personally to me, but were not part of the work, began to be part of the work. And with that, I mean, for instance, the looking for elements of the ecological crisis and starting to want to establish conversations with more with less cultural phenomena such as fauna and flora, I guess, and also in a third perspective, a feeling of unescapability of this model of progress, which somewhat relates to the first point, but I think it's a slightly different perspective, where I'm talking about a more general ideological situation where every structure in the city, no matter if it is aiming to replicate a specific aesthetic model or not is necessarily going to be built and kept for profit or for maintaining a specific kind of economical development that really doesn't seem to make sense at all. So that is basically what I was interested in the beginning. And of course, as time went on, even more things began to get into the work. The political situation in Brazil, of course, I wouldn't say that changed a lot since that I began the project, but it has got more intense, I would say, in the same direction that it was already going. And so a lot of those anxieties came into play as well. And a lot of that comes in the form of this small poems that I've written that are in the screen in between the two series. The first one is called Bananeira e Bem-te-vi, or in English, Banana Tree and Bem-te-vi. And the second one is called Liberty Statue series. And the second one is 4 images of this replica of the Statue of Liberty, which you can find in multiple, like in almost every building of this Brazilian department store, which has the facade faced like the White House, and it is owned by a Brazilian billionaire, which is not that interested in liberty at all. So yeah, I think that's an overall. I don't want to take that much time from everyone else. I think I might already have taken much time from everyone else.
Gustavo, thanks very much for that. That's fantastic. Listen, before we start with a couple of questions, I just wanted to say from here, this is the publication that's being created. Can everyone see that? Yeah. So, because here we have the publication, the work that Eszter and the artists have done with it. So they're all here. So hopefully they'll all be being sent to you. I'm here basically just to, in a way, to pick up on the critical lens that has been formulated by Eszter in the bringing together of you all. In a way, Gustavo, it'd be interesting to talk. Okay, so here we have the Statue of Liberty without the beacon, without the flame. You know, I mean, the irony is not lost. You know, it's how does it go down for this Havan department store? I mean, what do you think people's responses are to this particular image in this way?
Do you mean to the image that I made, or like to the image of the Statue of Liberty without the flame, like in the real in space where it is right now?
I mean, there's a critical approach that you've got, but actually, in a way, do you think the public in Brazil are aware that that's exactly what they're seeing, that there's no flame, that there's no torch?
Well, that's a tough question if you ask about the public in Brazil, because it is, I think, as most of the world, unfortunately, right now, it is dramatically polarized society. I think everyone, or almost everyone, would get the irony in the lack of the flame. But I think, and I don't necessarily see that much that necessarily as an issue, but I don't think everyone would approach it from the same direction that I would, because that liberty is an important value. I don't think anyone would contest that. The matter is who and which institutions and which programs and why is anyone trying to achieve this liberty. And I think that's where you know, different approaches to this image might appear, where like some people would probably understand where I'm coming from with this image, and that I'm necessarily associating like the very company that built this statue with a threat to liberty, while others might read it from different perspectives.
That's good. Just to pick up on one thing that Eszter has put in the text and I mentioned at the beginning, is that the idea of the global north is articulated in relation. You know, we know like the global south, but is this important to you, as in to understand this, the way that we are talking about that sort of in a way getting to the heart of inequalities? Yeah, so whether you've got a comment really about this use of the global north as a framing connection, does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as any other concept, it is not perfect, and it cannot be applied to everything. But for me, it is certainly useful. Of course, I speak from a very privileged perspective. I mean, economically and socially. I think both in a global sense and in a Latin American sense. But that doesn't affect the importance that this concept of the global north has in my everyday life. I think in the end, I mean, either a short historical retrospective in Brazilians and Latin Americans' history, or a more long-term approach, would make it very clear how our geopolitical context has limited our ability to, and I mean our as Latin American as a whole, although it is not a whole, but I mean in each national context or regional context, we have all in some way been, I think everyone has been limited somehow, but I mean our specific context and historical trajectory, as in the global south, has limited our ability to make our own choices, and that goes in many levels. That is both political, with dictatorships, or like economical, or even cultural, and the cultural lens is probably one of that interests me the most, because it is one that affects most deeply not, but maybe most noticeably the everyday life. So I would just to finish off this answer, I would just like to comment on a interesting characteristic of our culture, and I think this is specifically strong in Brazil, where there is a very, very noticeable understanding in basically all levels of society. That is, either if you are like upper class, a very rich person, or lower class, there is this very clear feeling that to develop, to evolve, and to be better tomorrow than you are today means getting closer to this image of the global north that you see in the TV or in the cinema or wherever. And I think that is probably one of the things that interests me the most, is this point where normal people, instead of being interested in creating their own solutions, be they practical solutions or aesthetic solutions or narrative solutions, they simply settle down in replicating what already exists and what is already consolidated, and probably consolidated like 100 years ago. Right. So you see people building and spending a lot of money into like suburban houses that look like 1950 suburban houses from US, instead of like go on.
So Gustavo, I was just going to say that in a way, one also can see how, in a way, with your words, the accompanying the works, you know, you're acutely aware that the pandemic is an accelerator to these kind of geographies of inequality. This is very much the case in Brazil, but it's right across in a way that the geographies and inequality are something to be acutely aware of in relation to the way that the pandemic is unfolding?
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't, to be absolutely honest, I haven't reflected that much, I guess, about this connection that you just established. Like, I can definitely see how our recent and like our political situation right now relates to a particular challenge relating with the pandemic, but I don't really see in this case as a particular issue with Brazil. Like I see a very similar situation happening in the United States, and with all the issues that we've got, like we've got a really, not a really solid, but we've got like a public health system. We got probably one of the as far as I know, I'm not a specialist, but as far as I know, we got a solid immunization public program. So in some senses, I feel like privileged in that sense, even though our response to the pandemic has been a huge disaster. I don't know. I think that the effects of the geography of inequality in relation to the pandemic will become sharper in the aftermath rather than right now. I think at this point, we're basically in the same level as every other place with a negationist government, which is not a huge thing, but anyway.
Thank you very much, Gustavo.
Thank you for the questions.
Thank you. Eszter, I'm thinking who is interested, or Rebecca, who's interested in presenting next?
Johanna, would you like to? Thank you, Gustavo. That was wonderful. Johanna, would you like to make a start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Johanna Karjalainen, based in Finland. I'm a sociologist and I study photography here in Helsinki now. And I'm very happy to be here today and see all of your faces after a long time. And very happy to participate on this exhibition curated by Eszter. Thank you. Yeah, so I could now share my screen and show my part of the exhibition. Actually, it seems that I can't share my screen either. Would you mind to share your screen, Eszter, once again? Okay, so yeah, my work, Nothing But Disappointing, discusses the relationship between human and non-human animals by focusing on the animal gaze. The work consists of the archival material from my childhood, filmed by my father, which you can see here on the left side, as well as on the right side, the trail camera images that I've been shooting in the northern Finland during the last half a year. Yeah, so as I said earlier, the animal gaze is in the focus, in the center of this work, and I wanted to find the gaze of an animal. and I started from this archival material that I had with me. And while going through the material, it became very fastly clear that the animal gaze is not actually very visible in the environment of zoos. So then I came across with this text looking at by John Berger. And I'd like to just read a short part of the text here for you, just a second. So John Berger writes that the public purpose of zoos is to offer visitors the opportunity of looking at animals. Yet nowhere in a zoo can a stranger encounter the look of an animal. At the most, the animal's gaze flickers and passes on. They look sideways, they look blindly beyond, they scan mechanically. They have been immunized to encounter because nothing can anymore occupy a central place in their attention. And therein lies the ultimate consequence of their marginalization. This historic loss, to which zoos are a monument, is now irredeemable for the culture of capitalism. So I think this part of the text was very much about what I had seen in the material that I was working on. And then I still wanted to find the gaze of an animal. So next to this archival material, I wanted to capture animals in their natural environments. So I set up the trail camera in northern Finland, in the woods, and I really like the randomness of how the trail camera works, so that I kind of give the control out, like to what to capture, that I don't need to control that, because I also think that, like, as a big fan of nature documentaries, I think that they very much very far directed and controlled, built from this human point of view. Yeah, so then what I found interesting once that I had all this material with me was that what I actually had captured with the trail camera was mainly animals that we consider as pets. And then at the same time, the animals that I, like all the wildlife that I was kind of looking after, was actually only seen in the artificial built environments. And that kind of gave this, or made this, what Eszter was writing in the essay about the banal construction of everyday life, very visible, that these places where we take our children into, like the social conditioning of, for the relationship of animals and non-human animals, was very visible in this case. Yeah, so I think this is what I have to say about the work at this point.
Thank you very much. I'm just thinking about, in the way that you have brought together the found material, which is existing, it's just interesting just to understand how you could imagine it working as exhibition. Do they sit next to each other side by side with the video?
Yeah, that was kind of the idea. The video material would be probably in a smaller screen, and then I had the prints there next to it.
This is just a personal observation. In the found footage there, you have to tell us who the little boy is being carried in the trolley, who is nodding off and is being clearly not exactly enthralled by where he's being taken.
It's my big brother Johanna. That's my mom pulling the trolley. Very entertaining environment.
But it is interesting. I was going to ask you about the animals and whether they were domestic animals, and you've answered that. But in a way, it's the kind of it's a complete counteraction, isn't it, to the whole sort of phenomena of social media and animals and the sort of personification of animals in a way. This, to go back to John Berger, to think about the animal gaze, just allows us to put ourselves in a place into this idea of species coexistence, which is exactly where I think Eszter is interested in terms of thinking about the frame and how we exist alongside other beings. But John Berger's words they ring out to the present moment in a really effective way.
Yeah, I think there is about this, coming back to this, what animals were seen in the trail camera images. It was it's very interesting the point that how all the animals, because you can't really recognize all of them in the trail camera material. Like some of them were just so far that you can't really recognize if it's a domestic animal or a wild animal. And that's kind of when you go yourself thinking of like, why do we need to, or like how socially constructed all these categorizations are, and yeah, and like how human like perspective they build from that, like what is the need of the animal? Is it food, or is it a family member, or is it like yeah, like all these different categorizations. So I think it was very interesting to see myself thinking like, oh, what is that animal? What is that one? It's like, why do I need to know? And
but to call it nothing but disappointing, in a way it's interesting, because this idea of detachment, of a critical distancing, I mean, why have you called it nothing but disappointing?
I think it was mainly that in the beginning of the project, I started working with the zoo material, and that came from inspired by the John Berger's text.
Yeah.
I think in the end it could have been called something else, and I'm still shooting with the trail camera, and I think I'm working on a book from that material. So I think the book will then probably be called something else. I mean, like it was in the beginning of the project where the name came from. So yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah. So thank you very much, Johanna. That's really, really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Eszter, do we know who would like to go next?
Thank you so much, Johanna. Indrė, would you like to present?
Hi. Yes, of course. Just before I start, I must say that I have a bad connection. So if for some reason you cannot hear me, just start waving to me and I will try to get back, because sometimes it just freezes the screen, but I hope it will be okay. I'm happy to be part of this exhibition as well as the parallel program, and cannot wait to introduce my project, which is called Don't Speak Loudly, It's Harmful for Butterflies. And it's interesting maybe also to start speaking immediately after Johanna, because my project deals a lot with disappointments. And oh, I forgot to introduce myself. So I'm a visual artist. I'm originally from Lithuania, but currently I live and work in the Netherlands. So my work is, it's a multiple video and audio installation. And the project itself speaks a lot about our growing need to travel, particularly now when we are not allowed or have many restrictions, and particularly with consuming nature through the lens and reproducing the images that we already saw online. The project itself is about the conflict between the expectations and the reality as a result of disappointment. And when I started to work on this project, it was not the visuals that first that intrigued me. It was more transforming myself to the virtual tourist and visiting the places that are recommended as a must-see locations and the ones that I haven't visited myself. So what I did, I was just going on TripAdvisor and looking at the images as well as what people were talking about it. And what struck me the most was that those beautiful and must-see locations had so many disappointing reviews. And I just started to write them down, and this was my starting point actually, where at the end it just became a narration which I wrote inspired out of those comments. And the whole narration is a guided tour that leads you, the visitor, which you become a tourist in this case. And the point is to find the butterflies for the whole tour, which you don't. And I use the butterflies in the whole narration as a certain metaphor for the beauty in nature, for utopian beauty in nature that doesn't exist. A second part of my work are the multiple short videos that are being constantly played on loop. And when I moved to the visual part of my work, I just was intrigued by these expectations, like who forms those expectations. And mostly when we visit travel blogs, we see the beautiful images, which always have very cliche aesthetics. So I went on image and video banks and just started to research the tourism photography, the ones, and particularly focusing on the images that depict the landscape in the most cliche way, the ones that have a very bright and vivid colors, zooming in, zooming out, slow motion. So there I started to film the fragment of those videos, and at then those small fragments of these visual aesthetics started to merge with my handheld movement, autofocus, or even the dirt from my screen became part of this work. And I like just to focus on the detail of it and kind of to bring this visual aesthetics with my amateur tourism handheld movement together into a new form. And together with these videos that are being constantly played on loop, as well as the audio, which kind of force you to find the butterflies, they reveal the never-ending man desire to find utopian beauty in nature. I think that would be it. And the website that Eszter is sharing now, it's from our exhibition. So there the videos are being played, but in order to hear the audio, you have to click the button underneath. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, is it, Eszter, do you think it would be good to be able to play the audio? Can you?
Yeah, let's try it.
If it doesn't work, that's fine, but.
Let's try it.
A short hike up to the viewing point, and there it is, a black, iconic mountain without vegetation. This breathtaking hiking trail with serene atmosphere is a home to thousands of butterflies that cover the entire landscape. It's the sort of place you only go once. Nothing to see apart from lots of black stones and a bit of snow. The wind is ridiculous and constantly blows sand in your face. What's the point of this place? The lack of butterflies is very disappointing. They are there, but not as you probably imagine them to be.
Do you want to pause it there? I was just thinking, I mean, it's such an observation here, but we really are ungrateful idiots, aren't we? And the way that our desire for must-see places is being explored in this work, and the way that you've used the metaphor for searching for the butterfly. You know, can I ask you about the voice? So how is the voice deployed? Is it did you say it's a synthesized voice, or what
No,
were you doing?
it's the voiceover actor that I found online, and I had a very clear vision how I wanted to sound, but at the same time I wanted to give the freedom to the artist to explore and just to translate what I wanted. So I sent her the script, and I gave her clear instructions that I want to sound a bit artificial, but I still wanted to have this human presence as a tourist who leads you through the tour. So it's a real voice. But I think now it's because we have the Zoom and the share screen, so it might sound too digitalized.
Yeah, it's it's a real exercise in the way that that, you know, it's how we just can't see the wood for the trees. It's like the metaphor of basically not being able to see beyond ourselves, and it comes through extremely well in relation to the idea of the search for the ultimate destination, and the utopic search for unseen or hidden landscapes.
Exactly, and I think here the visual culture nowadays plays a very big role in this, how we see the images and what we expect to see afterwards. We are being bombarded on social media of the holiday locations where our friends are spending. When we go on another website, we immediately see these aesthetics that kind of form the vision of a certain landscape, and then we go there, we want to see the same. But the problem here, I think, comes because of the over tourism. Those landscapes, they don't look the same anymore. And those negative comments, what was coming after and after was also people were commenting that there are too many people around. While yourself, you're also being there, you comment as a negative point that there are too many tourists, and it doesn't bring you the feeling what you saw before, that the landscape was really empty and beautiful, and you started to imagine yourself in it. And once you come there, there are thousands of other buses of tourists that really destroy your expectations. And for me, the biggest inspiration in this work was also the book by John Uri, The Tourist Gaze, who speaks a lot about this issue, how the tourism became inseparable part of the modern society, that it's a must activity, that we have to go on vacation in order to feel rested.
Yeah, that's the sociological aspect for several of the artists actually is quite important in terms of the framing of your approach as critical photographers, image makers. And it's interesting that you should mention, yeah, the tourist gaze. You know, the Cannibal Tours was a film from the I don't know, 80s or something, but it was just literally looking at this idea of this, you know, the search for the exotic and the tourist construction. But now you have it in this sort of landscape, you know, focus, and the locations that you're saying, like the destination, how to define a small place as make it possessing it in some ways by photographing it, by documenting it on TripAdvisor.
Yeah, because I also recognize myself when as a tourist, I became such a conscious tourist now, and I kind of started to reflect more on my actions. But it's I think became a habit of everyone else to have a camera all the time and to be able to photograph. And this is what we want to do when we go somewhere. We want to take a moment of it, but sometimes we just forget to look at the actual landscape. We just take a picture and we look for another better view.
Yeah, I was totally struck by the idea of the phrase the disappointing hiking trail, you know, that sense of disillusionment that in a way comes through, like, you know, in this idea of, because actually the images are anything but, you know, they're sensational, but the language that we chose to describe is, you know, detachment and disillusion. Sorry.
No, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Eszter, did you want to say anything? Just because actually there are commonalities there between Johanna's work and Indrė's work. And I don't know if you wanted to just chip in before we pass to Domonkos.
Yes, I think yes, I think there is definitely this type of connection between Indrė's work and Johanna's work in terms of how we wish to own the image of the natural world around us, how we want to construct our own images of landscapes or of animals. And I think there's this really interesting question which came up during one of our discussions with Johanna about the zoo footage, that I think her work also asks if we already possess enough images of animals in zoos. So we really have to look for other means to interact with them besides owning an image of an animal. And I think this is also present in Indrė's work, but with the inanimate world. And also I think there are connections between Indrė's and Johanna's work and that of Gustavo's project as well, in terms of colonization, in the sense that the exploitation of the natural world is also present in Gustavo's Bamtevi series, for example. So I think it's interesting to see these three projects side by side, because there are some traces that go throughout. And yes, and they both connect to social structures, but also to the politicization of the natural landscape.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you so much, Indrė. It's fantastic to meet your work, and I really enjoyed the text in relation to the image for that. Can we pass to Domonkos? Hi.
Hey. So hey guys, I'm Domonkos, and I'm a photographer and a conceptual artist based in Budapest. And just an introduction, my work basically like portrays like problematic contemporary social issues. And in this work, like Acts of Cassandra, I was mainly interested in how utopias and dystopian ideologies refer to the present day technological changes of humanity. And so I wanted to create a sort of a research station with my series as an installation where I guide the viewer through kind of like an imaginary environment built in the future, which operates with hidden references and symbols. And then these symbols were mainly inspired by the 20th century dystopian literature. So the whole concept of mine came up when I was reading, actually, also, like, I think Gustavo also said that like books were quite a big influence on his work. For me, it was the same. So I started out reading a lot of books on utopian and dystopian like states. For example, the 1984 was one of them, and the Brave New World was another one of them. And I think there was one quote which came which was for me really influential in the beginning of Brave New World. It was by Nikolai Berdeyev, utopias are basically more realizable than those realistic politics that are only carefully calculated policies of office holders, and towards utopias we are moving. But it is possible that a new age is already beginning, in which cultured and intelligent people will dream of ways to avoid ideal state and to get back to society that is less perfect and more free. And that was, for me, was kind of interesting it was like so inspiring for me. I thought, like, are we heading to this kind of idea that we are trying to avoid ideal states and to kind of reach for a society that is not based upon being perfect or based upon being free. And I was like it came up in my mind that we are basically not heading to this world. So for me, it was like I'm born, like I was I'm a 19th kid, you know, and growing up, you know, throughout these not only social and economical changes, but the changes in technology, and it was for me quite influential. And I think I have a lot of anxiety and a lot of like mental problematics because of it. So I was like, and I think I came into the realization now that a lot of my personal issues for me is quite linked to these technological and social changes. And when I was reading these books, I was wondering that there is kind of like a certain parallel I don't know, like phenomena between the states of utopias and dystopias and the state we are living in right now. I mean, globally, and I'm thinking about mainly techno-optimism and industrialism, and those kind of social deformations which are originated to these kind of dehumanization and these type of like third, or I don't know, like now it's fourth industrial revolution which we are living in right now. And so it was for me like the conceptual context was the first, and then I was thinking about like how could I include my point of views into an artwork. And I was mainly doing only those type of series which was only using photographs in it. So I was more of a photographer, but I always had this type of motivation to do more complex installative works. So I was like, okay, I think for this, I thought I should create a kind of like a research station as an installation where the viewer goes through kind of like a guidance, and there is a certain multidisciplinary approach to this. And my guidance not only would be metaphorical image making, which I've already used in my previous series, but also written materials, showing my workbooks to have a personal approach for this, and also to create a video installation, which is also a part of this artwork. And by creating kind of like this type of installative situation, I would not only guide the viewer, but I would basically it would lay out more help to the viewers to understand the main concept and to have their kind of own research about this concept that like the utopian and dystopian states are quite close to the states in which we are living in. And I think the great thing is about this series is that it's super fluid. So, or like you can there is many different ways to use this artwork. For example, in an installative situation, or or to present it. And it was basically also my concept that that it can be shown in many different environments and take many forms, besides like just being still images. I think the multidisciplinary approach is visible also in the website. It was like originally planned to be in a space. So for me, it was a bit hard, you know, to adjust these kind of like research materials and workbooks into the form of a website. But I think it came out well because we included like 2 pictures or scans of how my process was like linked to like personal notes and scientific like research.
Can I ask, so it's called Acts of Cassandra, and that's really specific in relation to predictive and who Cassandra was in Greek mythology. So in a way, do you want to talk about how you came to that title?
Okay, so the title was, it was not like, so first I started to develop on the conceptual context, and after that I was, for me, it was a really hard part, like figuring out what would be the title, because I wanted to have some kind of, because it's kind of like an imaginary mind map. It's kind of like a tale, you know, to be in this installative work. I was thinking about kind of like finding a tale to this title, and I was watching a movie actually, and it was the I can't remember the name, but there was this kind of like phrase they used, this Cassandra complex, and I was like really interested in that whether it is like a kind of like a phrase which was made up for the movie, or is it like a real? And then by the time I was like digging really deep into my research about this project and the materials, and I was already like making the pictures, I started to read about Cassandra complex, and I was like, wow, you know, it is so relatable to my series. And I was like, okay, I think maybe this Acts of Cassandra would be a wise thing to name like my series, because not only Cassandra stands out, but the Acts means not only like that the way how Cassandra, for example, like foresees a phenomena, but also like there are certain different layers created by me. I have different approaches, different to kind of illustrate these ideas. So and also like there are kind of like also like acts like in a play or in the theater that there are like 3 acts, you know, like the one is for the written articles, the one is for the video installation, and the other act is the pictures itself. So
can I ask a question, just because I noticed it's in terms of the research process and the notes in the margins, you've got a one note which is a reference to Stanley Kubrick and the Kubrick archive in London. Have you had a chance to go there?
Actually, no, because I was planning to go there, but it was, for me, like the whole series was kind of like the picture side of it was also in the time when I was traveling, because I spent half like a semester in Finland. I studied there, and I mainly concentrated on this artwork during this time. But I wasn't able to go from Finland because that was a tight schedule for me to the Kubrick archive. But it was like a missed chance. But I watched quite a lot of Kubrick movies at the time. So yeah. So and one was one which was also kind of like the Space Odyssey was also like for me kind of like an inspirational in terms of picture style also and
I'm mentioning it just because you should absolutely go there. I had the pleasure to kind of work with the archive on a project a few years ago. We borrowed some materials from the 2001 archive. The research that went on for the preparation of that film, of technological solutions around the future that Kubrick researched in a very detached way, is super fascinating. And the way that the corporate companies all produced like solutions, as it were, that were then possibly deployed in the film is really an interesting story. But in a way, it comes back to a little bit the idea of techno-utopian, sort of the idea that somehow we engineer our way through some solution through technology. Technology might result in the solution for climate change, for example, climate crisis. And this is clearly maybe not the only thing to rely on. And I think Acts of Cassandra is absolutely about that.
Yeah, it's for, you know, it's a hard thing because I'm not trying to be like completely like refusing with the term of technology. It's just the whole artwork is about like more of the process, how we excessively relying on technology and how it causes, for example, like social deformations. For example, like I'm just saying like how many people are anxious just because, you know, because the like certain platforms and because they are using all the time their smartphones, you know, which triggers them, you know, but this is like a small part, you know, because for me technology also means that this type of super like huge orientation towards economics and economical structures, and this was like, for example, in the 20th century dystopian novels, a lot of novel mentions this type of, you know, like the society which completely relies on economy and you know, in some certain aspects we are certainly going towards this direction also, because but yeah.
It's good. Thanks so much for that, Domonkos. It's great to hear about the work and get to know it also. I'm thinking, Eszter, do you want to, how do you want to do it? Do you want to talk about Sherry's work, or is maybe we just open it up into a more general conversation?
I could briefly introduce Shelly's work because I think it's really wonderful, but I also don't want to speak for her. So everything I say is my perspective, obviously. But I think it would be nice to show her work because it's really fascinating. The images which are included in the exhibition are part of a wider series called Fall Spring. And the images that I included here, these were shot in Japan and in the US. The first picture, this is, they are actually, there are 4 individual images, and I mean, 2 of them are very closely related, but I am going to talk about them a little bit later. So the first image is called Tree Cast, and this one has a very specific context. This was shot in Tokyo, and the tree is sick, essentially, and in order to hide its sickness and its appearance, they put this cast around it. And the reason why it's so sick is because it's not fit for the environment in which it was planted. And Shelli wrote an amazing description of this image, which I really recommend you all to read. It's included in the exhibition on the website. But just to sum it up really briefly, this is the result of forestry management in Japan, where they introduced these monoculture forests, which eventually led to the destruction of native species. And I think this this image to me really represents this urge, this unquenchable thirst to control the natural environment and to form it according to our needs in order to be able to exploit it for profit. And this is also described in Shelli's words, but this project completely failed economically, monetarily, and also in terms of the environment itself, because the timber industry is not flourishing in Japan, but they're still planting these monocultural cedar forests, and it's complete failure. So this really represents this. I think this really represents this power dynamic between Western cultures and Western cultures' urge to really dominate the natural environment. So another two images from the series are these flamingos. And we were discussing these with Shelli a couple months ago, and we were talking about how strange it is that the living flamingos, which she took the images of in the Bronx, they have a very uncanny quality. They appear almost like they have this meat-like quality. They do not look as flamingos when we first look at them. And how interesting it is that in reality, yes, these birds look like this, but then there is this other image of this performance put on by humans. These absolutely kitschy, ugly ornaments, which are trying to reproduce something which is natural, but in reality, it's so apparent that it's just artificial. And we, by putting these two images together, we wanted to play with this idea of performance and artificiality, and also how it relates to, once again, to the power dynamics that we want to implement when we interact with the environment around us. And the final image that we included on the website, it's so huge that it's not even fitting on my screen, and that's for a reason. This is a telephone pole in Brooklyn. Shelli grew up nearby, and this is once again an artificial performative element of how we build the landscape around us, and how we try to replicate natural elements of the landscape around us, but in reality we often fail to do so. And it's really, to me, this image is really interesting because at first when I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, what is this tree? This doesn't really belong there, and obviously it doesn't belong there. It's an artificial construction, and it's not a tree in reality. It's in the form of a tree, but it really remains this performative construction. And this is absolutely this somehow sort of disrupts the harmony that could probably be present otherwise in the image. So I really encourage you to look through the website and read Shelli's image captions. They are all very wonderfully crafted, and they can be found just below the images. And especially tree cast context is very specific. So I really recommend you with these texts.
I mean, this idea of artificial nature coming through, I like how in the description it talks about how, in a way, this was in her folk memory, as in her childhood memory. And so, you know, later as a photographer, as an artist, you realize, you step back and you sort of see these things. And then actually, obviously, it allows her to think about what's just there on her doorstep that deserves sort of documenting. And then in connection to the tree cast in Japan, where the tree is on life support by human you know, human intervention. But again, it's a sort of, it's a whole understanding. So the two things come together in a fascinating way, from a tree on life support to artificial tree.
Yes. And I mean, what you just said about Shelli growing up in Brooklyn, and essentially this pole being a part of her everyday landscape. I think this is very much about the core idea of the entire exhibition, that we are embedded in these power structures, in these power dynamics, and in order to be able to step out of them and to foster a discussion around them, we have to first recognize them and come to terms with them. And I think this image encapsulates in a way just that, somehow taking a note of something which has been a part of our everyday life, but suddenly realizing that it is something more.
I'm sure maybe the other artists will maybe have heard of this book, but in my own research for Letter to the Future and how we're going to go forward with it, which is actually taken from a book and a project from Andri Snare Magnusson, another writer. But I have also been reading Richard Power's The Over Story. I don't know if people have read that, but it's about how trees, the trees and their memories kind of affect our lives. It's a brilliant book. So if you haven't read The Over Story, it's definitely one to read. And you know, it absolutely picks up on the anthropogenic human changes in relation to how we understand, you know, whole other fauna and flora and fauna in relation to our own lives and stuff, and in relation to time as well, which I think is one of the key parameters that this great pause of coronavirus has allowed us to sort of think, actually, we need to think about time differently. This has been a time of pause and a time of stopping, and you start to think about maybe, you know, the life of a tree and its length of life compared to human existence, and these are humbling concepts to kind of explore.
Yeah, thank you for the recommendation.
Eszter, what would you like to do now? Is there some questions from some of the artists themselves, and then there could be some comments, or we could open it up? I mean, I'm sure there will be some comments from some of the artists in terms of having had a chance to hear. But it's up to you.
Yes, if you have any questions, please ask them, and then I think we can open it up. Or should we talk about the catalog first before opening it up to the audience?
The catalog, I have it here.
Yes. Would you like to ask questions, or should I start talking about it?
By all means, you start.
Okay. So basically, even though the exhibition is not happening in a physical form in Maribor, we were still very lucky to be able to produce a physical catalog, which is going to live on. And it's so basically, because the exhibition was going online, I think the catalog and how the catalog would look and what it would entail somehow took on a heightened importance for us. And the materiality was very important, so we decided to use all recycled paper. There was this wonderful type of paper which I came across when reading T.J. Damos's Decolonizing Nature. It is printed on this wonderful material, which is 100% recycled, but still has a very light color, and you can print on it and it's going to come out beautifully. So we decided to go with that, and we wanted to have a publication which is accessible, because the very ethos of the exhibition is to make the environmental crisis a little bit more accessible to us in our everyday life, to encounter it in a more, in an easier, in a simpler way. So we really wanted to have a publication which reflects this. and the book has an open spine, if you call it that. It has this somehow this rugged appearance, and also we decided to go with a quite a small size. It's on the smaller side, in order to make it approachable, to make it easy to handle. And yes, obviously it is still, I kind of want to acknowledge that it's not a sustainable publication, in the sense that it is going to be distributed around the world, which is going to have carbon footprint. But we wanted to have it produced of sustainable materials at least. So so that's what we were kind of going for.
That's great. Yeah, I was going to ask Domonkos whether actually he's seen the film The Medusa Touch. This is a 1980s film, which is, I think it's got Richard Burton in it. Anyway, I think it's definitely got the Cassandra complex in there. But basically, I don't know about anyone else, but I've been watching a lot of disaster movies in 2020.
Yeah, it was. I think Zora also commented it was the 12 Monkeys, the movie. So it was the original. Like the original idea came from. It was for me. It was quite a fascinating movie because like there was like this time traveling in it, and also this like dystopian feeling for it. So yeah, so it was just like, and it was a complete like random choice of mine. So it wasn't like planned. It was like in the middle of making this series. So.
Eszter, and just thinking about reflecting on what you said right at the beginning, which I think is the key thing in a way, is to reflect on the angles in which you were wanting to draw out the kind of the way that globalized systems kind of have an effect on our own lives, and in a way you're trying to pick up on both this issue. I mean, you pick up on colonialization, inequalities, techno-optimism, and the way that in a way we need, the exhibition urges us to recognize the influence of globalized systems on our own life. I mean, that's in a way, the way that you've selected the artists, there's a kind of critical approach through that you're bringing these people, you're bringing the artists together, but there's definitely this angle that you're interested in trying to explore. I mean, I was just wondering whether you wanted to comment on that, because basically it is quite a clear point that you're making.
You mean if I would like to comment on that, or? Okay, sorry. Yes. So yeah, I think when starting to develop the concept, one of the theories which were key at the beginning for me was the hyperobject theory by Timothy Morton. And I found it very fascinating. Morton writes about essentially this, that we are embedded in these hyperobjects which are so vastly distributed in time and space that we cannot really access them. We can maybe try to understand and access one piece of the entire hyperobject, but we cannot really grasp it all. And he cites the climate chaos, for example, or capitalism, and all these sort of all these entities which kind of just went out of control. And that was a very, I find that theory fascinating, but I also find it a little bit paralyzing and inhibiting to discourse and inhibiting to action. And I read a review of the book by Ursula Heiser, and she also writes about this, that it's very difficult to discuss these things after you actually try to imply that it's impossible to understand them. And in a way, the exhibition is about this, that we really have to try to understand these systems in which we are embedded. try to understand them, try to recognize them, and then take action and try to build a future that is more equitable, that is more habitable for everyone on the planet, be it human or non-human.
Yeah, and you would add, I think, the idea of species coexistence, as in species understanding, and the reframing of ourselves, which takes away from the anthropogenic focus, is another key frame that seems to be coming in.
Yes, yes, and yes, I mean, I think having interspecies coexistence is key in developing a more equitable world, but also what you just mentioned about anthropocentric ideologies. It's so important to step out of these frameworks and to kind of try to consider ethics of care, how to care for others who are maybe not of our own species, try to dismantle human non-human hierarchies. I think, yes, this is something which I also wanted to include in the exhibition, and I think with Johanna's work, I think we managed to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Does anyone else have any observations or any questions?
Does anyone have any questions from the audience?
Can you read? Can you see that, Eszter?
Yes. So we have a question from Maribor, actually, from the venue. Can any of the artists talk about how they would display their work if the exhibition wasn't online?
I think some of us also made sketches and like how it would look exactly in the UGM. Also, there was, I remember also Gustavo had, right? Or am I wrong?
Yeah. No, actually, I don't know. Correct me if I'm mistaken, Eszter. But I think we all like we have gotten to the point where we had discussed like each of our works specifically in this exhibition, right? Like, for instance, I remember my 8 images would be printed in like not big, but like medium-sized prints and framed, and they would be like spread through a wide wall, and in 2 clusters in the middle, like a projection with the poems. In my case, it was that.
Indrė, do you think that we could disclose what we were planning, or should we keep it as a secret?
No, we can disclose it. Our idea was to show the work, the videos to show on the smartphones or on the tablets, and just like to spread it in the middle of the space. And one of the idea was having them attached to the selfie sticks, because that's also a very commonly used tool in the tourist photography. So they would be just maybe like floating, hanged from the ceiling, and then looping in space. And then another element was the Bluetooth speakers that you can just put it on and become a tourist and emerge into this hiking trail and walk around the screens.
I mean, it certainly looks like you can tell from the range of works that it's going to be dynamic in terms of use of media. So you can tell that there would have been, I mean, for example, the poetry, the words elements had to be conveyed in some way, and the images. So you have quite a lot of dynamic use of media to make the exhibition. So it needs to happen.
Well, hopefully it will happen in the future.
Okay. Can I?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, just to comment that it was an amazing conversation, and it's really interesting to see in deep all the concepts and having these all the ideas that are behind the artwork, and so all the conceptual part is really interesting, and even one good part of these stupid times that we are living is that we have more time to talk calmly, as we can't go out. So we have time is not something that we miss now. We have enough time to reflect and to go and to explain deeper, even if it's in the virtual aspect. So it's really really interesting to see all this dynamic, and to us in the parallel, it's interesting to see now how we are concluding this series of online virtual exhibitions that with this exhibition now today we are closing all these 6 exhibitions that unfortunately we have to do it online. It's not so bad, but whatever, it's what we have, so we have to play with this, with all the sites, and it's interesting to see all this movement, how it has been developed, and it has been real at it is possible. Well, we are all here, and it will be interesting also to see, as Alexandra mentioned, so all these real. We're going to have the exhibition, the opportunity to see the exhibition in Rio, physical, here in Lisbon in November. So during the parallel review, so it will be a moment to see all the 6 exhibitions that we have during August and September. They existed in the virtual world, so we're going to have the opportunity to see it in Lisbon in the physical space, and with another approach for Rio. Unfortunately, due this probably second wave with the same restrictions of people, and so it will be also not so good, not so warm as we want, but this is the time that we are living. Whatever, we have to play with this and do the best that is possible, but it will be really it's always a big discovery and very challenging moment and exciting moment when we saw all the works, how the creators work with the arts, with the art contents, and how they create these different narratives that appear, and so it's really interesting, and we are really exciting to set up the exhibitions here, and have the opportunity to see it in Rio, in the concrete and physical space. That it's a bit what is the aim of the project. Well, the human contact and the human network that is so important to us. Unfortunately, it continued to be very restricted and very distant, but we can say part of the project having the exhibition itself. But it's really, I just want to say that it was an amazing conversation, and it's really interesting to see how with different works produced by different artists, it's make a coherence discourse, and having all these questions that all these issues that you have approached, the Anthropocene approach, and about the different questions and the ambient and the sustainability and all these related with art. I think it's really a future issue that we have to approach and have to be aware, also in the whole world, in the whole society, but also us as artists and actors of change, whatever where it goes. well, just want to thank you. Very good work.
Yes, I just to add though, thank you, Nuno and Rebecca. But I'd like to thank all the artists for making this a really entertaining and engaging presentations. I really enjoyed listening to all of you and getting to meet you. And thank you very much, Eszter, for bringing this project together with these artists.
Thank you so much for moderating. And I also want to say a big thank you to the mentors who helped during the process. So they're not here today, but they were Norma Duma Mazilela and Anna Kaiser Rastenberger, who helped in the development of the concept throughout the year. So a big thank you to them as well.
I just want to add something more that you have already mentioned, but it's always important to mention again that all this project was built with the artists and the curators, and of course with the members. And it's now virtual. It's important to mention that this exhibition was launched in Maribor, and so Maribor is one of the members of the network, and the network, the platform, the parallel platform, only works with their presence and their contributions. So it's really important that we keep the artists, the curators, and also the members all together. We just miss the public, but it will come, I hope, very soon.
Yes, thank you so much to everyone at UGM, to Simona for hosting us. It's been a real pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks a lot.